My name is Elara, and welcome to the Late Night Science Channel. I'm really glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had one of those days where your mind just won't stop spinning, or maybe you're the kind of person who likes ending the evening with something calming, something that makes you think but doesn't demand too much energy. Either way, you're in exactly the right place. Just let yourself sink into wherever you're resting right now. Take a slow breath and allow your thoughts to drift into a quieter rhythm. Tonight, we're going to explore something that might sound a bit unusual at first, something most of us never really think about. We're going to talk about plants, but not in the way you learned about them in school, not just chlorophyll and photosynthesis. We're going deeper than that. We're asking a question that sounds almost impossible. Can plants actually think? And before you dismiss that as silly, just stay with me for a moment, because what science has been discovering lately is genuinely surprising. Now, before we go any further, if you find these gentle science explorations helpful for unwinding at the end of your day, I'd really appreciate it if you could tap that like button. It's a small thing, but it helps other people who need this kind of calm content find their way here too. And if you enjoy what we do, subscribing means you'll never miss these quiet journeys into the world of science. All right, let's begin. When you think about intelligence, what comes to mind? Probably something that moves, right? A dog figuring out how to open a door, a crow using a stick to fish out food, maybe an octopus escaping from a tank. We associate thinking with action, with making choices in the moment, with responding quickly to what's happening around us. Intelligence, in our minds, means being able to chase, to flee, to hunt, to hide. But here's the thing. What if intelligence could exist without any of that? What if you could be brilliant without ever moving at all? That's the puzzle plants present to us. From the moment a seed splits open and sends down its first root, that plant is stuck. It can't run from danger. It can't chase after better sunlight. It can't wander off to find a mate. And yet, plants have conquered almost every corner of this planet. They thrive in burning deserts and frozen tundras, in toxic salt flats and dense rainforest floors where barely any light reaches. They've done all this without a single neuron, without anything we'd normally call a brain. So how? How do they survive? How do they adapt? How do they make what look an awful lot like decisions? That's what we're going to explore tonight, slowly and gently as your mind begins to settle. The first challenge in understanding plant intelligence is that we're operating on completely different clocks. When an animal reacts to something, it happens fast. A rabbit hears a twig snap and bolts in less than a second. A spider feels vibrations on its web and responds immediately. But plants operate in slow motion. Where we might take seconds to react, a plant might take hours or days or even weeks. That doesn't mean nothing's happening, though. It just means we've been watching the wrong way. Scientists have discovered that plants can actually sense around 20 different signals from their environment all at the same time. They detect light, obviously, but not just whether it's bright or dark. They can tell what color the light is, which direction it's coming from, even whether it's filtered through the leaves of neighboring plants. They sense moisture in the soil, the pull of gravity, the presence of nutrients, changes in temperature, and even the chemical signatures of other organisms nearby, both helpful ones and dangerous ones. But here's what makes it interesting. They don't just detect these things passively, like a thermometer just sitting there measuring temperature. Plants actively integrate all these signals. They weigh them against each other. They make what we might call trade-offs. When roots grow toward a water source, they're not just randomly spreading in all directions, they're ignoring other signals and prioritizing that water. When a leaf shifts its angle slightly to avoid being shaded by its neighbor, that's not automatic, it's conditional, based on what else is happening around it. And this is where things start getting really intriguing, because this kind of context-dependent behavior, this weighing of different inputs and choosing a response, that's actually one of the hallmarks of what we call intelligence. Not consciousness, mind you. We're not saying plants have feelings or thoughts the way we do, but intelligence? That might be a different story. Let me tell you about a plant that really challenged how scientists think about all this. It's called Mimosa pudica, and you might have seen it before. People sometimes call it the sensitive plant, or the touch-me-not. When you touch its leaves, they fold up almost instantly, curling inward like they're trying to protect themselves. Scientists always thought this was just a simple reflex, like when your knee jerks when the doctor taps it, an automatic response, nothing more. But then researchers started doing something interesting. They took these plants into their labs and started dropping water on them over and over from the same height. At first, the leaves would fold up every single time, but after a while, something changed. The plants stopped closing their leaves. They'd learned, somehow, that these drops weren't dangerous. And here's the really fascinating part. When the scientists introduced a new kind of stimulus, like shaking the plant instead of dripping water, the folding response came right back. The plant wasn't just tired, it had learned to distinguish between harmless repeated stimuli and potentially dangerous new ones. Even more remarkable, this learned behavior persisted for weeks. The plants were moved to completely new environments, different rooms with different conditions, and they still remembered. They still didn't close their leaves for that specific, harmless stimulus. Without a brain, without neurons, without anything we'd recognize as a memory storage system, these plants had recorded an experience and changed their behavior because of it. So what else might be hiding in these quiet green organisms? What other capacities are we only just beginning to notice? Scientists around the world are now asking these questions seriously, not as a thought experiment, but as real research. They're not just studying how plants react anymore, they're studying how plants process information, how they make sense of their world. And the more they look, it more seems that plants aren't just responding to their environment, they're interpreting it. They're filtering out noise, they're detecting patterns, and in some cases, they seem to predict what's coming next, which is really where things start to sound almost impossible. There was this experiment with climbing bean plants. Scientists put them near a light source that moved in a circle, rotating around the plant in a predictable pattern. At first, the beans did what you'd expect. They grew slowly toward wherever the light currently was. But over time, something shifted. The plants stopped changing their growth direction before the light moved. They were anticipating where it would be next, growing toward a future position rather than the current one. Think about that for a moment. The plant had detected a pattern, the regular rotation of the light, and started using that pattern to predict what would happen next. That's not just reacting, that's building some kind of internal model of the world, even if it's an incredibly simple one. It's the plant version of seeing dark clouds and expecting rain. And this wasn't the only example. In another study, researchers exposed small flowering plants called Arabidopsis to cold temperatures at the same time every day. After just a few cycles, the plants started doing something extraordinary. They began activating their cold response genes before the cold arrived, as if they were preparing for something they expected to happen. This wasn't reflex, it was anticipation. The plants had remembered the timing of stress and adjusted their internal chemistry ahead of time. No brain, no neurons, just patterns stored somehow in the way their genes turn on and off. This distinction between simple reaction and actual prediction is at the heart of modern plant intelligence research. It's one thing for a seedling to bend towards sunlight. That's phototropism, a well-understood mechanical response to light hitting one side of the stem more than the other. But it's something entirely different for a plant to adjust its behavior based on a pattern that hasn't happened yet. That's not just sensitivity, that's beginning to look like inference, like the plant is holding on to past information, comparing it to what's happening now, and using both to shape what it does next. That probably sounds familiar, because it's exactly how learning works in animals, not through simple reflexes, but by building models of the world and updating them with new information. And somehow, remarkably, plants seem capable of something similar, even without the electrochemical machinery we always thought intelligence required. But if there's no brain, where is all this happening? Where inside a stem or a leaf or a root does this predictive ability actually exist? To answer that, we need to completely change how we think about thinking itself. In animals, thought is centralized. Your brain gathers signals from your eyes, ears, skin, all your senses, and processes them in one place. It stores memories in specific regions. It issues commands from a control center. But plants don't work like that at all. There's no headquarters, no command center where signals come together and decisions are made. Instead, everything is distributed. Every cell participates in some way. Across a plant's body, networks of cells are constantly exchanging signals, both chemical and electrical. And these signals don't just stay local. They can travel from the roots all the way up to the leaves and back again, changing behavior across the entire organism. In some experiments, when one leaf gets damaged or touched, other leaves that weren't touched at all will change their chemistry, producing defensive compounds as if they'd received a warning. That kind of coordination across the whole body suggests something important. It suggests integration, not just sensing, but evaluating, not just reacting, but choosing in some sense. And what's really fascinating is that these choices often follow a kind of logic, like the plant is weighing costs and benefits. Take salt in the soil, for example. Salt is generally bad for plants. It damages roots and makes it harder to absorb water. So you might think a plant would always avoid salty areas. But it's not that simple. Researchers found that when they gave plants a choice, some roots would actually keep growing into salty soil if the nutrient levels there were high enough. If the reward outweighed the risk, the plant would take the chance. But if nutrients were low, the roots would hold back, avoiding the salt entirely. This is context-dependent decision-making. It's not a hardwired response that happens the same way every time. It's a calculation, in a way, a biological cost-benefit analysis that varies depending on multiple factors at once. And it's all happening without a single neuron firing. So here's the question that keeps coming up in plant science these days. If a plant can weigh options and select a path forward based on competing priorities, does that count as intelligence? Or are we just missing better words for what's actually going on? The more we learn, the harder it becomes to draw clear lines. We're seeing memory, prediction, decision-making, integration of different signals, all things we used to think required some kind of brain. But intelligence isn't just about sensing and making decisions internally. It's also about communication, about sharing information between parts of a system, or even between completely separate organisms. And this is where the plant world gets truly strange, because plants are talking to each other all the time. We just never knew how to listen. A lot of this communication happens underground, in ways that are invisible to us. Plants don't use sound or sight. Instead, they send chemical messages from root to root, sometimes directly through root contact, sometimes through signaling molecules that travel through the soil, and sometimes through vast networks of fungi that connect them like an underground internet. Here's an example. When a plant is experiencing drought, stressed because it can't find enough water, it can send out chemical signals. Neighboring plants pick up these signals through their roots, and even though they haven't felt the drought themselves yet, they start preparing. They begin closing the tiny pores on their leaves, called stomata, to conserve water. They're getting ready for a stress they haven't actually encountered yet, based entirely on information received from a neighbor. That's anticipatory coordination, and it's honestly startling when you think about it. These underground networks can span huge distances. In forests, symbiotic fungi called mycorrhizae form partnerships with tree roots, and these fungal threads can link entire communities of trees together. Researchers have documented resources being shared through these networks, carbon flowing from large, established trees down to smaller saplings struggling in the shade, nutrients being redistributed during times of stress, and when one tree gets injured or attacked by insects, it can send chemical alarm signals through this fungal web, and nearby trees will respond by ramping up their own defenses before the threat even reaches them. It's an early warning system, a botanical version of someone shouting, "Hey, watch out, something's coming." And it's not just happening through fungi or roots. Plants also release compounds into the air, volatile organic chemicals that drift on the breeze. When a plant gets chewed on by an insect, it releases these airborne messages, and neighboring plants detect them and immediately start producing their own defensive chemicals, things like tannins or alkaloids that make their leaves taste awful or even toxic to herbivores. The plants are eavesdropping on each other, listening for signs of trouble in the chemicals floating through the air. This kind of signaling challenges the old assumption that plants are isolated, independent organisms. Instead, they're embedded in these incredibly complex information networks. A single tree doesn't exist alone. It's part of a social system, one that responds, adapts, and sometimes cooperates. And it gets even stranger. Some researchers have found evidence that certain plant species can recognize their relatives, responding differently to close kin than to unrelated neighbors. In experiments with sea rocket plants, individuals grown next to their siblings were less aggressive in competing for root space than those grown next to strangers. They seemed to favor coexistence with family over conflict with outsiders. Now, in animals, this kind of selective social behavior usually involves neural mechanisms, cognitive maps in the brain, sensory integration centers, decision-making hierarchies. But in plants, the tools are completely different. Signals move slowly, molecule by molecule, through vascular tissues and cell walls. Communication happens through chemistry, not electricity. And yet, the outcome still resembles choice. In some cases, these choices don't even come from individual plants. They emerge from groups acting together, a kind of collective intelligence playing out on a botanical scale. One striking example is desert shrubs that synchronize their flowering based on rainfall. It's not just one plant responding to water, it's an entire population coordinating timing, making sure that when pollinators arrive, there's a whole display of flowers ready and waiting. The signal gets distributed, the behavior becomes collective. And in forests, this becomes even more complex. Through root grafts, overlapping canopies, and shared mycorrhizal networks, entire communities of plants seem to modulate their behavior based on shared information. It's not just cooperation, it's interdependence. The success of one tree might actually depend on the health and decisions of many others around it. These networks, sometimes called the wood wide web, are formed by those underground fungi that link roots together. Through them, trees can exchange carbon, nitrogen, and various signaling molecules. A shaded sapling struggling to photosynthesize might receive sugars from a sunlit neighbor. A tree under attack by pests can send out chemical alerts, and nearby plants boost their defenses ahead of time, preparing for an assault that hasn't reached them yet. This isn't random diffusion of chemicals, it's targeted, it's responsive, and research suggests it's often reciprocal. Some species even seem to distinguish between relatives and strangers, preferentially sharing resources with genetically related individuals. Others adjust their growth strategies depending on who's nearby, extending roots aggressively toward competitors, but growing more gently near siblings. In these relationships, we start seeing another layer of what might be called awareness. Not awareness in the sense of subjective experience, not consciousness. We're not suggesting that a tree knows things the way you know things, but it perceives, it distinguishes, it changes its behavior not just for itself, but in relation to others. And it's not only fungal cooperation. Some species form incredibly tight partnerships with ants, offering nectar or hollow spaces to live in exchange for protection from herbivores. Others use volatile chemicals to eavesdrop on nearby species, picking up on stress signals or flowering cues to better time their own development. Even parasitic plants like dodder, also called devil's vine, can sniff out preferred hosts by detecting chemical signatures in the air before making any physical contact. These examples don't fit neatly into our animal-centered models of cognition. There are no faces here, no eyes, no movement, no brains. But there is complexity, there is choice, there's information being gathered, interpreted, and used in ways that directly shape survival. And remarkably, some of this communication even crosses species boundaries in subtle, mysterious ways. Under certain conditions, a damaged plant releases airborne cues that trigger responses not only in nearby plants of the same species, but in entirely different ones. A wounded tomato plant, for instance, might warn a nearby bean plant. The signal isn't linguistic, obviously, it's chemical, but it still conveys meaning. Danger is nearby, threat detected. The implication is striking. Meaning can exist without language. Information can be shared without anything resembling a nervous system. These signals don't travel through wires or thoughts. They move through molecules, through diffusion, through the shared atmosphere of a living community. And yet the effect is similar to communication as we understand it. A message gets sent, a message gets received. Behavior changes as a result. And the language of plants turns out to be far more sophisticated than we once imagined. Some species can actually tailor their chemical output depending on what kind of threat they're facing. If an insect chews on a leaf, the plant might release compounds that attract that specific insect's natural predator. But if a pathogen attacks instead, like a fungus or bacteria, the chemical profile shifts entirely, activating defenses more suited to fighting infection. This isn't just reaction, it's discrimination. The plant can tell what kind of attack it's experiencing and adjust its response accordingly. That level of nuance requires recognition, a way to parse incoming stimuli and determine meaning. In plant biology, that means decoding complex molecular cues through networks of receptors, cascading signals, and hormonal regulation. Every leaf, every root tip, every patch of tissue is part of this system, a node in a distributed web of information. Some scientists have started comparing this to rudimentary forms of computation. Not digital computation, of course, there are no processors or binary code, but computation at its core just means transforming input into output according to rules. In plants, those rules are biochemical: light, gravity, herbivore saliva. These environmental cues trigger precise chains of molecular reactions that ultimately change the organism's behavior. And just like a computer can perform logic operations, if this, then that, so can plants. Some responses only happen when multiple conditions are met simultaneously. Certain defense genes, for example, activate not from light alone or stress alone, but from the combination of both. That's conditional reasoning, embedded not in circuitry, but in the architecture of plant physiology itself. What makes this even more fascinating is that these logic circuits aren't fixed. Plants can reconfigure their responses based on past experiences. Stress can prime certain pathways, making future responses faster or more intense. In this way, plants show a kind of learning, not by directly changing behavior in the moment, but by changing the threshold at which behaviors get triggered later on. This ability to recalibrate sensitivity, to tune your inner workings to better match the world outside, is another marker of intelligence in living systems. And one of the most intriguing aspects of all this is how these responses scale up. A single leaf might respond to a wound by producing defensive compounds locally, but that same signal can travel cell to cell, tissue to tissue, triggering defenses in distant leaves that were never directly harmed. This system-wide signaling often gets carried by electrical impulses or waves of calcium ions, which is eerily reminiscent of how neurons communicate in animal brains. But unlike neurons, plant cells aren't specialized just for signaling. They're also busy with metabolism, absorbing light, managing water, synthesizing all kinds of chemicals. Their dual function adds layers of complexity. A plant's internal network is both its communication system and its engine for staying alive. And yet, within all that complexity, signals still move with apparent purpose. Some signals travel faster than others, up to a few millimeters per second, and they follow distinct pathways depending on what kind of stress triggered them. Herbivore damage triggers one pattern of signaling. Drought triggers another. It's not just that the plant sends a message, it chooses how to send it, where to send it, and what form the message should take. That kind of specificity hints at something deeper than reflex. It hints at internal representation, which in cognitive science means the ability of a system to encode the state of the world, to hold some kind of model of external reality within itself. When a plant differentiates between different qualities of light, different soil compositions, different nearby competitors, and alters its growth based on those distinctions, It might be engaging in a form of representation, a biochemical map not drawn in thoughts, but in chemistry. This idea that plants build internal representations of their world is still controversial, but it's gaining traction, especially as more examples of sophisticated decision-making come to light. In one study, corn seedlings were grown near a mechanical fan that always preceded the arrival of a light source. The fan would turn on, and then shortly after, light would appear. At first, the plants grew slowly toward the current position of the light, as you'd expect. But over time, something shifted. The plants started adjusting their growth not toward where the light was, but toward where it would be. They began changing direction just before the light moved, as if anticipating its next position. This predictive growth suggests a form of expectation, not conscious expectation, obviously, but something subtler, a model of repeated experience encoded directly into behavior. It's the botanical equivalent of predicting the weather by remembering yesterday's patterns. And while this might not be thinking in any traditional sense, it raises the real possibility that plants track not just what is, but what might be. Now, skeptics have questioned whether these responses really meet the threshold for learning, but from a behavioral standpoint, the criteria are actually pretty clear. If an organism changes its future behavior based on the pairing of past experiences, it has learned something. And in this case, the corn seedlings behaved in ways that suggested memory, anticipation, and associative processing, all without anything resembling a nervous system. So how does this even work? The answer lies in the language of cells. Plants regulate behavior through incredibly complex networks of hormone signals, electrical impulses, and changes in gene expression. Each pathway is tuned to specific environmental inputs, light, pressure, temperature, nutrients, and can modify growth or chemical output accordingly. Over time, the plant's history becomes encoded in its physiology itself. This encoding, storing environmental patterns in physical form, is one of the most fascinating aspects of plant behavior. It allows for what some researchers have called somatic memory, the idea that a plant's body carries its experiences not in some centralized storehouse like a brain, but as distributed history across its tissues. For example, repeated exposure to drought can cause some plants to preemptively adjust how their stomata behave, those tiny pores on leaves that regulate gas exchange. Even when moisture returns to normal levels, the altered stomatal pattern can persist, as if the plant remembers the risk and continues hedging its bets. This isn't just passive carryover, it's an active, regulated shift that often involves epigenetic changes, where gene expression gets modified in response to stress, and those modifications remain long after a stimulus is gone. In some cases, these adjustments can even pass to the next generation. Seeds from stressed plants sometimes inherit altered response profiles, a kind of biological foresight where offspring come pre-equipped to handle conditions their parent endured. It's not evolution in the traditional sense, not DNA mutation. It's a subtler, more flexible mechanism, transgenerational memory through chromatin modification, small RNAs, and inherited hormonal states. This transfer of experience across generations has led some scientists to explore what they call environmental inheritance, not genetic traits encoded in base pairs, but ecological intelligence passed along through physiological imprinting. Essentially, a plant's behavior gets shaped not only by its own genome and immediate surroundings, but by the lived experiences of its ancestors. If a lineage has survived repeated cycles of drought, high salinity, or pest pressure, its descendants might grow with a kind of baked-in sensitivity to those same pressures, adjusting root depth, growth timing, or chemical defenses accordingly. These aren't guesses, they're inherited strategies, crafted not just by DNA, but by history itself. This kind of inheritance complicates how we draw lines between instinct and learning. In animals, learned behavior is typically individual, acquired through direct personal experience. But in plants, those borders blur. When information persists across generations without changing the actual genome, it challenges our traditional evolutionary models and raises new questions about how we might define intelligence in systems that lack consciousness entirely. It also invites us to think about a different kind of intelligence altogether, not something housed in a single mind, but something that emerges collectively, not just across cells within one organism, but across many organisms. In forest ecosystems, for example, certain tree species connect below ground through those vast mycorrhizal networks, symbiotic partnerships between roots and fungi. These networks aren't just passive conduits for nutrients, they actively transmit chemical signals between trees, alerting neighbors to drought, disease, or insect attacks. In some experiments, when a tree gets injured, say by a pest infestation, it releases warning compounds into this shared network. Nearby trees, even those of completely different species, respond by ramping up their own chemical defenses before ever being attacked themselves. This coordinated response, spanning dozens or even hundreds of individual organisms, gets nicknamed the Wood Wide Web, and it's truly remarkable. But what's even more striking isn't just that communication happens, it's the selectivity involved. Studies suggest that trees might prioritize their kin or those they share mutual benefits with. In some cases, they seem to allocate more carbon or nutrients to their own offspring than to unrelated neighbors. It's a subtle but significant sign that even in plants, cooperation and competition get negotiated, not blindly, but with context-aware rules. The dynamics of this underground communication are more sophisticated than they first appear. Chemical messages sent through root and fungal networks don't just travel passively, they move along concentration gradients, get selectively absorbed or ignored by recipient cells, and in some cases seem modulated in strength depending on the sender's condition. A tree in serious distress might emit a stronger signal, prompting a more urgent response in its neighbors. The volume of the message can be dialed up or down depending on the situation. And receiving plants don't all respond identically. Different species and even individual plants of the same species might interpret the same chemical cue differently, increasing defenses, altering growth patterns, or changing root architecture in subtly distinct ways. This suggests that messages aren't universally hard-coded instructions. They're open to interpretation, filtered through each listener's physiology and prior experiences. This layered responsiveness adds yet another dimension to our understanding of plant intelligence. Interpretation isn't just possible, it's variable, and that variability might serve an important ecological purpose. In a mixed species forest, the same signal could trigger different protective behaviors in different plants. A volatile compound released by a damaged willow might prompt a nearby alder to boost tannin production, while prompting a spruce to change the timing of its bud opening. Each response gets tuned not just to the message itself, but to the biology of the receiver, and perhaps the broader ecological context. Researchers have also discovered that some of these responses depend heavily on past exposure. A plant that's previously encountered a particular threat might respond more quickly or more strongly to a warning signal than one that hasn't. It's been primed, in effect. This phenomenon, called induced resistance, means plant defenses can operate on a kind of immunological memory, not just reacting to stimuli, but storing and refining those reactions over time. This brings us to a fascinating frontier: the idea that plant communication isn't just functional, it's adaptive. It's not static, it evolves over time. Signaling systems can become more efficient, more specific, more finely attuned to local ecosystem dynamics. And if communication itself can adapt, then in a very real sense, plants are shaping the languages they speak. In some species, this refinement goes surprisingly deep. Take sagebrush, for instance. When damaged by herbivores, these plants emit complex blends of volatile chemicals. But what's remarkable is that the composition of those chemicals can vary depending on who's nearby. A sagebrush surrounded by close relatives releases a slightly different chemical mix than one surrounded by strangers, suggesting not only kin recognition, but the potential for customized messages. Even more striking, receiving plants, especially genetically related ones, respond more strongly to those customized signals. It's almost like a dialect, not universal, but familial. Plants may be developing localized chemical languages tailored to their specific communities, improving both efficiency and relevance of their warnings. This raises an extraordinary possibility that plants, through evolution and ecological feedback, have developed systems of information exchange that are both context-sensitive and flexible, systems that transmit not just raw data, but something approaching meaning. The message changes depending on the sender, the receiver, and the history between them. But what does it mean to share meaning without a mind? In cognitive science, meaning is usually linked to representation, to the idea that a system can encode something about the world and act on it. In humans and animals, this typically involves symbols, language, or neural patterns. But in plants, meaning might reside in chemistry, in specific blends of terpenes, alkaloids, or phenols released into the air. These aren't just stress responses, they're actionable signals. One particular compound might tell nearby plants to thicken their outer cuticle. Another might trigger faster root growth. The message exists in the molecule, and that molecule doesn't exist in isolation. It gets read through receptors, proteins embedded in plant membranes that bind to specific compounds and set off cascades of internal responses. These cascades often involve hormones like jasmonic acid or salicylic acid, chemical messengers that relay the signal inward, tuning gene expression and altering physiology throughout the plant. The message gets passed, received, interpreted, and in some sense remembered, all without a single thought occurring anywhere in the system. This kind of chemical literacy, the ability to sense, decode, and act upon volatile signals, is widespread across the plant kingdom. Corn, tobacco, tomatoes, acacia trees, sage, and dozens of other species have all demonstrated airborne communication. The air between plants isn't empty. It's a medium for conversation, slow, silent, molecular. And like any conversation, context matters enormously. The same molecule can have completely different effects depending on who receives it. A volatile cue from a damaged tomato plant might trigger strong defensive responses in another tomato, but a different species might ignore it entirely. In some cases, even the same species will respond differently depending on past exposure. If a plant has already encountered a certain herbivore before, it might become primed to react faster the next time, a form of chemical conditioning that sharpens the meaning of the signal through experience. This sensitivity isn't random. It's built into the architecture of the plant's signaling pathways, networks of receptors, enzymes, and transcription factors that interact like biological logic gates. Some pathways amplify each other, others inhibit. Some only activate when multiple cues are present simultaneously, like a specific chemical signature combined with a mechanical wound. In this way, plants don't just detect messages, they interpret them, they discriminate, they apply context. And remarkably, this interpretation can extend to eavesdropping, the unsolicited monitoring of other species' signals. In one experiment, researchers found that sagebrush plants released warning volatiles after being mechanically damaged, and nearby tobacco plants, an entirely different species, responded by boosting their own defenses. The tobacco wasn't the intended recipient, but it had apparently learned to associate those particular cues with danger. It had learned to listen in. Some plants take this even further, not just listening to others, but modifying their own signals based on who's around. In competitive environments, certain species emit volatile compounds that actually inhibit germination in nearby seeds. This isn't defense, it's preemptive strategy. If resources are limited, preventing neighbors from even getting started becomes a form of ecological control. But intriguingly, this suppression can be fine-tuned. If the nearby seeds are close relatives, the chemical output may lessen, suggesting a form of kin-selective behavior that shapes not just individual growth, but entire community structures. This interplay of signal and response creates a dynamic field of chemical negotiation. Plants aren't locked in isolated monologues, they're part of a biochemical discourse full of cues, counter-cues, alliances, deterrents. In weedy meadows and dense forests alike, these interactions influence which plants dominate, which cooperate, and which wither in the shade of more strategic neighbors. Even parasitic species have learned to exploit this chemical language. Daughter vine, Cuscuta, doesn't photosynthesize at all. It has to latch on to a host plant to survive. But how does it choose? Studies show that daughter seedlings can detect volatile signatures from different potential hosts, bending towards some while avoiding others. Given a choice between tomato and wheat, for instance, daughter often moves toward the more nutritious tomato. It's not growing blindly, it's choosing. It's selecting a target based on chemical information, a decision with real survival consequences. And even once attached, parasitic plants continue monitoring their hosts, adjusting their own metabolism, growth rate, and even reproductive timing based on how well their host is doing. If the host is struggling, the parasite might reduce its drain to avoid killing it entirely. If the host is thriving, it might increase nutrient uptake. It's a balancing act, a kind of economic behavior governed not by conscious intent, but by feedback and modulation. What makes these interactions even more striking is how many happen simultaneously. A single plant might be processing dozens of signals at once, assessing nutrient gradients, water availability, herbivore pressure, and the identity of nearby neighbors. These inputs don't exist in isolation, they're layered, overlapping, often conflicting, and yet the plant responds with apparent coherence. It doesn't collapse under the noise, it filters, it prioritizes. This capacity to integrate information, to sift through complexity and produce coordinated responses is part of what's led some researchers to argue for a broader definition of cognition. Not cognition as consciousness, not as internal experience, but as a system's ability to acquire, store, process, and use information to guide adaptive behavior. In this light, a plant's distributed chemical network, with its capacity for anticipation, discrimination, memory, and even learning, starts to look less like a passive biological structure and more like something we might cautiously call a quiet, leafy mind. If we accept this broader framework, that intelligence can emerge from system dynamics rather than being confined to brains, then the plant world becomes not just fascinating, but philosophically challenging. It forces us to revisit long-held assumptions about what it means to know, to perceive, to act with purpose. And it invites entirely new questions about where the true boundaries of cognition actually lie. For instance, recent studies have shown that plants can exhibit forms of electrical habituation. When repeatedly exposed to non-harmful stimuli, like mild vibrations or gentle touches, the amplitude of their electrical responses gradually diminishes over time. They stop reacting as strongly. This kind of neural-like attenuation is actually considered a primitive form of learning in animals. In plants, it's governed by calcium signaling, ion channel activity, and shifts in membrane potential. And crucially, it's not just fatigue wearing the system down. When a new stimulus gets introduced, something different, like shaking instead of touching, the electrical response returns at full strength, indicating selectivity rather than exhaustion. Other researchers have begun exploring whether plants might actually listen to sounds. In controlled experiments, roots have been shown to grow preferentially toward the source of specific acoustic vibrations, such as the gurgling of water flowing through a pipe. The idea that a plant can detect and respond to sound even without ears or anything resembling a nervous system sounds almost impossible, but the data suggest real sensitivity to pressure waves. Tiny mechanoreceptors in root cells appear to transduce vibrations into electrochemical signals, allowing the plant to use sound as yet another navigation cue in its growing environment. And sound is only one frontier. Plants also appear responsive to electromagnetic signals in ways we're only beginning to understand. Some studies suggest that plants can detect weak magnetic fields, like those generated by Earth's own geomagnetic field, and subtly alter growth direction or cellular processes in response. The mechanisms are still being debated, but hypotheses include magnetically sensitive proteins like cryptochromes, which are already known to mediate light responses and might also function as a kind of biological compass. If this turns out to be true, it would mean that plants navigate not only through soil and light, but through invisible fields of force spanning the entire planet. This multimodal sensitivity to light, gravity, water, chemicals, sound, and possibly magnetism gives plants an extraordinary situational awareness. But what's perhaps most remarkable is how they integrate all these inputs. Plants don't just respond to one signal at a time in isolation. They synthesize, they prioritize. If water is scarce but light is abundant, they might favor root growth over leaf growth. If temperature and light signal opposing cues, the plant makes a choice, allocating resources in ways that reflect weighted, conditional logic. These aren't automatic, pre-programmed responses. They're contextual behaviors. The plant is weighing variables, choosing among strategies, altering its internal state accordingly. Some of this coordination relies heavily on plant hormones, chemical messengers like auxin, gibberellin, cytokinin, abscisic acid, and ethylene. Each has multiple effects depending on concentration, location, and context. Auxin, for example, promotes cell elongation in stems but inhibits growth in roots. It flows directionally through tissues, creating gradients that literally shape how a plant bends, branches, and forms new organs. In this way, hormonal signaling in plants operates somewhat like neurotransmission in animals, except it's slower and doesn't involve synapses. Signals diffuse across space, get picked up by receptors, and trigger cascades of genetic and biochemical changes that ripple through the organism. Some researchers now believe that this collective responsiveness, these massive webs of shared chemical cues and resource flow, may represent more than just a communication network. It might actually constitute a form of distributed intelligence, not a brain, not even a mind in any conventional sense, but a system that together holds and acts upon information about the environment in ways no individual plant could manage on its own. This idea isn't purely philosophical, it's testable. When parts of these networks get disrupted, for instance, when mycorrhizal fungi are removed from soil, the ability of plants to anticipate stress, coordinate flowering, or share nutrients declines significantly. The network itself appears to function as a cognitive unit. Damage the system, and the intelligence fades. This challenges our entire conception of what it means to be an individual. In the plant world, identity is more porous, boundaries blur. A tree isn't just a tree standing alone, it's a node in a living web, shaped by and actively shaping the behavior of others around it. Its memories might be carried in hormones, in root tips, in fungal threads. Its choices get influenced by neighbors. Its resilience is fundamentally communal. And if that sounds strange, consider this parallel. In our own brains, individual neurons aren't conscious. A single synapse knows nothing. But together, through trillions of connections, they give rise to thought, to awareness, to the sense of self. Something similar might be happening in forests. Each plant, each fungal strand is just one part, but together they form a dynamic system that senses, reacts, adapts, and in some sense learns, sometimes across entire communities. And the mechanisms behind all this aren't magical or mystical. They're biochemical, ecological, measurable, testable. As scientists continue probing these relationships, a genuinely new vision of intelligence is beginning to emerge, one that isn't limited to neurons, to movement, or even to individuals. A kind of intelligence that is quiet, slow, deeply rooted, flowing through sap and soil rather than thought and speech. An intelligence we're only just beginning to truly see. This broader view of cognition as something distributed, emergent, embedded in physiology itself, is fundamentally changing how we think not only about plants, but about intelligence as a concept. It suggests that intelligence might not be a property exclusive to brains, but rather a spectrum of processes by which living systems respond effectively to complexity. And in that light, the behaviors of plants, once dismissed as passive, automatic, or purely genetic, take on entirely new significance. They're shaped by history, tuned by feedback, influenced by neighbors, and in many documented cases, they exhibit the same hallmarks we use to define cognition in animals: memory, learning, decision-making, adaptability. Of course, these processes unfold on radically different timescales. A plant doesn't react with the speed of a fly or the cunning of a primate. Its decisions are slow, deeply rooted in the tempo of seasons and the cycles of sun and rain. But slowness isn't simplicity, and patience isn't passivity. One of the most striking implications of this research is how it completely reframes the concept of problem solving. In traditional cognitive science, solving a problem requires awareness of a goal, recognition of obstacles to that goal, and finding a pathway to overcome them. But in plants, we're beginning to see versions of this too, stripped perhaps of awareness, but definitely not of strategy. Consider climbing plants that must locate support structures to ascend. Without support, they risk being shaded out and starved of light. So how do they find it? Some species, like pea plants and morning glories, engage in a behavior called circumnutation, a slow, spiraling movement of their stems as they grow. This isn't random wandering. The trajectory often gets adjusted in response to nearby surfaces, optimizing the chance of making contact. If the plant detects a nearby pole or branch, it biases its growth in that direction, and once contact gets made, tendrils coil around the support and climbing begins. But the fascinating part is what happens before any contact. In some experiments, climbing plants appear to aim their growth more efficiently when support is nearby, as if somehow sensing its presence before touching it. Subtle gradients in light, humidity, or volatile compounds might act as cues. And once support is located, the coiling motion tightens in response, a feedback-driven refinement allowing the plant to cling more securely. Some researchers have even proposed that this behavior meets minimal criteria for tool use, not in the sense of manufacturing an object, obviously, but in identifying and exploiting a feature of the environment to achieve a goal. The support structure becomes a tool for reaching sunlight, and the plant modifies its own form to make use of it. This leads to deeper questions about perception itself. How does a plant know there's a pole nearby? It lacks eyes, it lacks ears, and yet, through gradients of light, shifts in airflow, changes in chemical diffusion, it assembles a map, crude perhaps, but effective, of what surrounds it. That's not passive sensing, that's environmental modeling. And it goes even further with certain carnivorous plants. Take the Venus flytrap or bladderwort. These plants must distinguish between random environmental disturbances and the actual movement of prey. A Venus flytrap won't close unless two separate trigger hairs get touched within a brief window of time, usually around 20 seconds. This mechanism dramatically reduces the chance of wasting energy on raindrops or falling leaves. It's a logical gate built into living tissue. If stimulus A and stimulus B occur within timeframe X, then execute response. That's not just detection, it's conditional processing, a form of temporal reasoning embedded in the structure of a leaf. And it's not limited to Venus flytraps. Take the aquatic bladderwort, Utricularia. This tiny carnivorous plant sets molecular traps in water, bladder-like structures held under negative pressure, sealed with a flexible door. When small aquatic organisms brush against trigger hairs near the opening, the door swings open and prey gets sucked inside in less than a millisecond, one of the fastest movements in the entire plant kingdom. But here's what's remarkable. The plant doesn't trigger this mechanism for every bit of movement. Like the Venus flytrap, it requires specific conditions to be met, a calibrated combination of mechanical and temporal inputs. And once triggered, the trap only resets after internal pressure gets restored, which takes energy and time. This system is energy efficient, highly selective, and astonishingly fast, all from a plant with no neurons, no muscles, no awareness in any conventional sense. So where exactly do we draw the line? If a system can detect stimuli, distinguish between different types, hold information over time, and act only when specific conditions are met, is that not some form of cognition, even if it's built from water pressure and cell walls rather than electricity and synapses? Even more striking are plants that modify behavior in response to social context, changing how they grow or reproduce depending on who's nearby. Some species actually delay flowering if closely related individuals are present, reducing competition for pollinators. Others increase defensive chemical output when surrounded by strangers, suggesting a kind of social discrimination operating at the biochemical level. It's a world of quiet calculations, choices made without thought, yet still guided by information, thresholds, and goals. In recent years, experiments have really started probing just how sophisticated these calculations can be. Take Botanical trifoliolata, a rare vine native to Chile. This plant does something genuinely remarkable. It changes the shape, size, and even color of its leaves to mimic those of whatever plant it's climbing on. If the host has small, round leaves, Botanical grows small, round leaves. If the host's leaves are jagged or deeply lobed, Botanical follows suit, matching them almost perfectly. What's truly astonishing is that Botanical doesn't just mimic one host species. It can adjust its morphology across a wide variety of neighbors, even switching leaf shapes if it moves from one host to another along its climbing path. And here's where it gets even stranger. It does this without direct physical contact. In some experiments, vines that weren't even touching their host plants still altered their leaves to match nearby foliage, strongly suggesting the presence of airborne cues, possibly chemical signals, or even some form of light pattern recognition. This ability to assess another plant's form and then modify your own body to match it is genuinely difficult to categorize. It isn't a simple reflex, it's context-dependent, dynamic, and clearly involves multiple sensory inputs operating together. In other words, it looks an awful lot like perception, like the plant is actually seeing, in some distributed chemical way, what's around it. Even more intriguingly, mimicry in Botanical appears to be adaptive in function. By blending in with its host, the vine likely avoids herbivores that overlook it as just another part of the background vegetation. It's camouflage, not in the animal sense with movement and hiding, but in a botanical one, identity masking through morphological plasticity. What's perhaps most provocative is that this mimicry doesn't seem hard-coded genetically. It's not a fixed trait triggered by one simple environmental cue. It's fluid, learned in a sense, a living plant altering its developmental body plan based on who it's near and what they look like. Some researchers have speculated that Botanical's mimicry might rely on a kind of visual perception, or at least detection of light patterns that differ depending on the structure of nearby leaves. If true, it would mean some plants are capable not only of detecting light intensity and direction, which has been well known for decades, but also of interpreting spatial characteristics of the light environment in ways that genuinely approximate vision. Vision, in its broadest sense, is just the detection of spatial patterns of light and dark. It doesn't necessarily require eyes as we know them. If a plant can sense the shadows, reflectance patterns, and geometry of a neighboring plant's leaves, and then reshape its own tissues to match, then it is, in a very real way, perceiving form. Not through a nervous system, obviously, but through light-responsive cells distributed across its entire surface. This isn't an isolated case either. Some carnivorous plants, like Venus flytraps as we mentioned, rely on intricate timing and mechanical feedback to distinguish between random touches and actual prey. To trigger trap closure, inner hairs must be touched twice within roughly 20 seconds, a built-in safeguard against wasting energy on false alarms, like debris or raindrops. That timing requirement implies memory, not long-term memory spanning days or weeks, but short-term biochemical recording of past events, stored in calcium gradients and electrical charge within the leaf tissue itself. Other plants exhibit similar temporal discrimination. The stinging hairs of Urtica dioica, the common nettle, don't fire off their chemical defenses unless certain mechanical thresholds get met. It's not that the plant just reacts blindly to any touch. It waits, weighs input, and then acts based on cumulative cues over time. This kind of behavior parallels the way neurons sum inputs before firing an action potential, except here, the logic is happening in vascular tissue and epidermal cells, not in synapses. Together, these examples strongly suggest that many plants don't just passively register the world around them, they parse it. They don't just grow toward opportunity or away from danger. They assess, compare, and in many cases adapt in highly specific ways based on subtle, multimodal information about their surroundings. Even with all the data we've explored so far, many scientists understandably remain cautious. After all, if we're going to seriously claim that plants exhibit something genuinely like cognition, the burden of proof is extraordinarily high. That's why the frontier of plant intelligence research has shifted increasingly toward tightly controlled experiments, ones that can isolate cause and effect, measure learning over time, and test for behavioral flexibility across changing conditions. One particularly elegant example comes from a study on pea plants grown inside Y-shaped mazes. In these experimental setups, researchers paired a gentle breeze blowing through one arm of the maze with light delivered through that same arm shortly afterward. Over repeated trials, the plants began associating the breeze with incoming light, bending toward the breeze even when the light itself was withheld. This kind of Pavlovian response strongly suggests the formation of associative memory, which is a core feature of adaptive behavior in animals. And when the same experiment was reversed, breeze and light decoupled, behavior changed accordingly. The plants hadn't just reacted blindly, they had formed a contingent expectation and successfully updated it when conditions shifted. Other researchers have tested plant responses to spatial awareness and mechanical simulation in fascinating ways. In one study, bean plants were grown with an overhead support beam positioned nearby, something they could eventually reach and wrap climbing tendrils around. But before any contact was made, researchers gently moved the beam to a new position. Instead of continuing on their previous growth trajectory, the climbing stems reoriented in the direction of the displaced support, not randomly, but with altered growth arcs that genuinely suggested target tracking. It was as though the plant had formed a kind of spatial map, a model not just of where the support had been, but where it had moved to. Of course, there are real limits to how far these analogies can stretch. What we call learning in plants may not be learning in exactly the same mechanistic sense as in animals. There's no hippocampus storing patterns, no neurotransmitters forming associative links. But behaviorally, the parallels are genuinely striking. In some carefully designed cases, plant responses meet the same criteria used in animal cognition studies: habituation, sensitization, discrimination, generalization, even reversal learning, where a previously learned association gets undone and replaced with a completely new one. That last one, reversal learning, is often considered a particularly strong benchmark for cognitive flexibility, and there are plants that, under carefully controlled conditions, appear to pass it. They learn one pattern, then when conditions change, they unlearn it and adopt a different one instead. Part of what makes this research so challenging is that signals in plants move on completely different timescales and through entirely different mediums than we're accustomed. Animal behavior unfolds in seconds or minutes. Plant behavior might take hours or days. Measuring meaningful change requires enormous patience, precision, and the ability to distinguish between growth patterns that are genuinely adaptive versus those that are merely mechanical responses. That's why modern studies increasingly rely on time-lapse imaging, gene expression markers, and custom-built environments to track behavior with fine resolution. These tools have revealed micro-adjustments in leaf angle, subtle shifts in root patterning, and precisely timed hormone releases that would have been completely invisible just a few decades ago. And what's emerging from these painstaking studies is a new kind of scientific language, one that tries to describe cognitive phenomena without inappropriately anthropomorphizing them. Researchers carefully speak of plasticity, information processing, non-neural computation, and distributed sensory integration. These terms might sound abstract or overly technical, but they actually represent a deliberate, thoughtful attempt to define plant behavior on its own terms, not by comparing it constantly to what animals do, but by understanding what it fundamentally is, a unique, biochemically rooted form of responsiveness that genuinely stretches the boundaries of how we define intelligence in living systems. Some of the most compelling experiments in recent years have come from studies on root navigation. In one particularly clever setup, researchers created complex obstacle courses underground, intricate matrices of artificial soil, narrow tunnels, dead ends, and scattered nutrient pockets, then planted seedlings at the edge and watched what happened. Over time, the roots didn't just grow blindly forward, they explored. They probed into spaces, paused as if assessing, sometimes retracted, then rerouted in different directions. In some trials, roots clearly preferred paths leading to nutrient-rich zones, actively avoiding dead ends with low reward potential. Their growth wasn't linear or predetermined, it was contingent, genuinely exploratory, as if each individual root tip were simultaneously a sensory organ and a decision maker rolled into one tiny growing point. This idea that roots exhibit intelligent foraging is strongly supported by their extraordinary sensitivity to environmental cues. The very tip of a growing root is absolutely packed with receptors. It can simultaneously detect gravity, moisture, pressure, chemical gradients, mechanical obstacles, and even the presence of nearby organisms, whether helpful microbes or competing roots from other plants. When the path directly ahead gets blocked, the root doesn't just stop growing, it bends. It tries again from a different angle, and if it finds a more promising direction, it commits resources there, actively growing in that new direction. This flexible, adaptive behavior emerges from decentralized coordination of cellular signals, calcium waves, auxin gradients, membrane potential shifts, all interacting dynamically without any central control system directing traffic. One of the most fascinating proposals to emerge from this work is the concept of the root brain. Not a brain in any literal sense, obviously, there are absolutely no neurons involved here, but rather a region at the very tip of each root, where sensory input gets integrated, movement gets directed, and responses get initiated in surprisingly coordinated ways. Charles Darwin himself once speculated on this idea, way back in his book, The Power of Movement in Plants, writing that the root apex acts somewhat like the brain of lower animals, serving as a command center for the whole root system. modern researchers are now taking that old metaphor seriously, not as a claim that plants literally think like animals, but as a way of recognizing that complex information processing can genuinely emerge, even in the complete absence of neurons or anything resembling a nervous system. This root brain hypothesis has sparked a real resurgence of interest in root apices, particularly what's called the transition zone, a narrow region between the meristem, where new cells are born, and the elongation zone, where cells stretch and grow. Here, cells show especially high activity in electrical signaling, displaying measurable spikes in ion flux and membrane potential that look eerily reminiscent of neural activity in animal brains. Some researchers argue that this zone could genuinely function as a kind of command center for each growing root, not centralized across the whole plant, but sufficiently integrative within each growing root tip to coordinate complex decisions about growth direction, nutrient prioritization, and even avoidance behaviors when encountering obstacles or toxins. When this specific region gets experimentally damaged, the plant's exploratory behavior becomes noticeably erratic, as though its sense of direction has genuinely been disrupted or impaired. But what's perhaps most striking isn't just the complexity of these responses, it's their remarkable plasticity, their flexibility. In carefully controlled laboratory conditions, root behavior varies not just between different species, but even between genetically identical individuals. Two seedlings with identical DNA, placed in identical environments, may still choose remarkably different paths as they grow. That variability isn't just noise or random error, it actually suggests a kind of stochastic strategy built right into the system, an inherent flexibility that increases the odds of success in genuinely unpredictable environments. In ecology, this gets called bet hedging, distributing risk across different strategies to improve overall survival over time. That plants seem to do this naturally, with no brain, no awareness, no conscious control over where their seeds land, is truly a marvel of evolutionary engineering playing out in slow motion. In fact, this idea of probabilistic strategy appears across the entire plant kingdom in fascinating ways. In seed germination, for example, many species will sprout at dramatically different rates, even under seemingly identical conditions. Some seeds delay germination, others leap ahead immediately. It's not a mistake or malfunction, it's biological insurance. If conditions suddenly turn bad, an unexpected late frost, a flash drought, at least some offspring will have timed things differently and might survive. And remarkably, this timing tendency is often heritable. The inclination to germinate early versus late can be passed down through generations, fine-tuned continuously by natural selection. The plant is, in effect, encoding a survival strategy across its lineage, one that balances risk and reward without a single conscious thought occurring anywhere in the process. This capacity for strategic variation, both within individual plants and across generations, speaks to something genuinely deeper than mere mechanical reaction. It suggests an underlying framework for adaptive behavior, a sophisticated way of handling uncertainty that is neither completely rigid nor entirely random. And this flexibility extends far beyond just growth timing and root navigation. It applies to form itself. Many plants exhibit remarkable morphological plasticity, dramatically altering leaf shape, stem thickness, or branching structure depending on light levels, wind exposure, crowding, or even the presence of herbivores in the area. In some well-documented cases, a plant growing in consistently windier conditions will produce noticeably thicker stems and shorter distances between nodes, mechanically optimizing its architecture for better survival in those conditions. It's not following a preset genetic plan, it's following a conditional blueprint that responds dynamically to environmental input. We see this beautifully in climbing plants. When a tendril encounters a potential support surface, it doesn't just wrap blindly around whatever it touches. It tests, it explores, it adjusts tension depending on what it finds. Some species can even distinguish between different types of support, smooth versus rough surfaces, rigid versus flexible structures, and they alter their grip mechanics accordingly. This fine-tuned mechanical feedback, modulated in real time at the cellular level, gets achieved through specialized cells that respond exquisitely to pressure and touch. These aren't nerves in any traditional sense, but they absolutely serve a similar functional purpose, transducing external physical input into specific, localized behavioral responses. And in some cases, that behavior can ripple through the entire plant body, altering its whole mode of growth in response to what one small part has encountered. One of the most dramatic examples of this comes from parasitic plants like dodder, Cuscuta. When a dodder seedling first germinates, it swings in slow, sweeping arcs through the air, a searching behavior known as circumnutation. But this movement isn't random at all. Studies have clearly shown that dodder can detect airborne chemical cues released by nearby plants, and it will bend preferentially toward preferred host species that offer better nutrition. Once contact gets made with a potential host, the dodder doesn't just immediately attach, it actually evaluates the quality of that connection. If the host plant turns out to be nutrient-poor or heavily defended chemically, the dodder may detach and try again elsewhere, continuing its search for a better option. This is a plant that not only searches actively, but makes choices, assessing and rejecting options based on quality. And the sophistication doesn't end at host detection. Some studies have shown that once dodder successfully attaches, it can exhibit differential gene expression depending on the specific identity of its host. It's literally tailoring its parasitic strategy to match the particular defenses or nutritional content of whichever plant it's feeding on. This is conditional exploitation at a biochemical level. A parasitic plant isn't just passively leaching nutrients, it's actively sensing, continuously evaluating, and dynamically adjusting its approach. And it accomplishes all this without eyes, without ears, without anything resembling a brain. Just an elegant toolkit of chemical perception, mechanical feedback, and genetic plasticity working in concert to solve a very specific biological challenge: how to survive by living on someone else's body. This behavior isn't limited to parasites. Even in non-parasitic plants, researchers have uncovered startling forms of spatial awareness and navigation. Some climbing species appear genuinely capable of what researchers call anticipatory reaching, growing toward nearby supports before any physical contact is made, adjusting trajectory based on sensed proximity and orientation in three-dimensional space. In a particularly elegant series of experiments with pea plants, scientists placed vertical support poles within range of the pea's exploratory tendrils. The peas began shifting their growth direction toward those poles even before touching them. And when the poles were deliberately moved to new positions, the plants reoriented, not instantly obviously, but deliberately, progressively, as if recalibrating their spatial model of the environment around them. This kind of spatial modeling is especially striking precisely because it unfolds so slowly. We don't usually think of growth as behavior. We think of behavior as something that happens quickly, something you can see in real time. But if we define behavior more carefully as an active, context-dependent change in state, then growth absolutely qualifies as behavior. And when that growth becomes genuinely responsive to dynamic surroundings, when it bends, halts, accelerates, or retreats strategically based on new incoming information, it really does begin to resemble a form of embodied problem solving. Not thought, perhaps, not in any way we'd recognize, but definitely a structured response to structure, a way of matching internal processes to external form. In this view, every shoot and root becomes a kind of slow-motion hypothesis. What if I grow this way? What happens if I try that direction instead? Let me test this path and see what I encounter. And It isn't only external structures that plants respond to and optimize around. They also seem to continuously assess and optimize their own form as they develop. Consider leaf arrangement, the precise pattern of leaves along a stem or branch. Many species exhibit what's known as phyllotaxis, an intricate mathematical spacing that maximizes light capture while minimizing self-shading between leaves. These arrangements often follow Fibonacci spirals or golden angle distributions, optimizing efficiency in ways that genuinely rival carefully engineered solar panel arrays. But this elegant pattern isn't hard-coded in the genome as a fixed blueprint. It's emergent. It arises dynamically from continuous feedback between growing cells, shifting chemical gradients, and internal hormonal signals, all adjusting in real time as the plant develops. Even root architecture, long assumed to be governed purely by simple tropisms like gravity and moisture gradients, now appears to involve far more complex regulation than we ever imagined. Roots don't just blindly follow nutrients. They branch, bifurcate, and reorient based on prior contact with obstacles, competitive pressure from neighboring roots, and shifting internal nutrient needs. When multiple roots from the same individual plant approach the same promising patch of soil, they often avoid overlapping with each other, effectively maximizing territorial coverage. But when roots from a neighboring plant are encountered, the strategy may shift dramatically, sometimes avoiding direct competition, sometimes aggressively outcompeting, depending on species identity, degree of kinship, and broader environmental context. The root system, invisible to us beneath the soil, is constantly negotiating an unseen three-dimensional map, one continuously informed by both chemical memory and real-time spatial measurement. Some experiments have even explored the intriguing possibility that roots exhibit a form of tactile discrimination, actually feeling their way through different soil textures. When grown in the presence of differently textured materials like sand, gravel, or clay, roots often prioritize one texture over another, not purely based on nutrient content, but on mechanical feedback on how the material feels to growing root tips. They can literally feel their way through the soil, actively selecting pathways that balance stability, permeability, and access to resources. And in split-root experimental setups, where a plant's root system gets artificially divided into separate compartments with dramatically different conditions, scientists have observed remarkably coordinated allocation strategies. One half of the root system might aggressively explore a nutrient-rich zone, while the other half holds back, conserving resources. Then, if environmental conditions shift, the strategy can reverse entirely. It's a whole plant decision emerging from localized sensing at many points, distributed intelligence literally playing out in the dark soil. We also see this adaptability clearly in how plants regulate their internal chemical economies. Secondary metabolites, that vast, diverse array of compounds produced beyond the bare essentials of growth and reproduction, aren't generated haphazardly or randomly. These include alkaloids, terpenes, phenolics, and countless other substances with specific roles in defense, attraction, signaling, and stress response. Plants actively modulate production of these chemicals based on ongoing environmental conditions, often with truly remarkable specificity and precision. A tomato plant attacked by one particular type of caterpillar may ramp up production of one specific set of alkaloids, while a completely different insect herbivore triggers an entirely distinct chemical profile tailored to that threat. These tailored biochemistry reflect a sophisticated diagnostic capability, an ability not just to detect damage in general terms, but to classify it, to determine what kind of attack is occurring and respond with appropriately matched molecular tools. Moreover, these chemical decisions are demonstrably cost-balanced. Producing defensive compounds takes significant energy, and that energy could otherwise support growth, reproduction, or root expansion into new territory. So the plant must choose, must allocate. Should it invest now in protection, or wait? Should it direct resources toward defending one particular leaf, or spread them across many? These aren't conscious choices, obviously, but they are functional analogs to resource budgeting, economic decision-making at a cellular level, and they change systematically based on history, current context, and predicted future need. A plant that's been attacked before often primes its chemistry, producing defensive compounds more rapidly next time, even if the immediate threat has completely passed. That means plants not only measure current danger in real time, they genuinely remember the past and actively prepare for probable futures. And this biochemical foresight can be astonishingly nuanced when you look closely. In some species, plants can detect not just herbivore presence in general, but specific herbivore saliva chemistry, clearly distinguishing between mechanical damage from wind or rain and actual insect feeding. Others can differentiate between touch caused by harmless raindrops and touch caused by climbing vines or insect footsteps moving across leaf surfaces. In every documented case, the response is highly specific, not generalized reactivity, but carefully tailored modulation based on precise signal identification. That level of discrimination genuinely demands an internal system capable of encoding and comparing signals, a distributed network that, while absolutely not conscious, nevertheless functions with clear rules and logical structure. It may not think in any human sense, but it perceives with real structure, with conditional logic embedded in biochemistry. This capacity for rule-based response has inspired some researchers to borrow terms from systems theory and cybernetics to describe plant behavior, not merely in traditional biological terms, but as a genuine form of distributed computation happening in living tissue. In this conceptual view, the plant functions as a dynamic information processor, constantly updating its internal state based on a remarkably wide array of inputs, adjusting behavior through intricate chemical feedback loops, epigenetic modulation, and intercellular signaling cascades. It doesn't decide like a brain decides, but it resolves uncertainty by integrating information from many sources, and that, fundamentally, is what computation means. One of the most evocative examples of this computational view lies in plant circadian rhythms, those internal biological clocks. Nearly all plants possess these molecular time-keeping systems that track the passage of time independent of external light exposure. These clocks allow plants to anticipate sunrise and sunset, to adjust photosynthetic machinery accordingly, and to precisely time flowering, leaf movement, or chemical synthesis to match daily rhythms. These are not simple reactions to light appearing and disappearing. They are genuine forecasts, predictions based on internal models. Even in total darkness, isolated from any environmental cues, plants continue to modulate their internal processes on a roughly 24-hour cycle, guided by molecular oscillators composed of transcription factors, feedback loops, and layers of genetic circuitry. Circadian systems in plants are remarkably robust, flexible, and capable of being entrained, synchronized by environmental cues like temperature fluctuations and light-dark cycles. But they are also genuinely self-sustaining, capable of what scientists call free-running cycles that persist indefinitely in isolation. That's an essential feature of a true internal clock, not just responding to the world, but independently marking time, adjusting rhythm only when external signals specifically demand recalibration. The ability to entrain, to predict, and to correct timing deviations is a sophisticated form of self-regulation, one that borders on what cognitive scientists might legitimately call temporal modeling, maintaining an internal representation of time itself. In recent years, scientists have begun asking how deeply this temporal modeling actually shapes a plant's overall behavior. If a plant can reliably anticipate dawn, could it also anticipate seasonal changes, predict the return of pollinators, forecast coming drought based on historical patterns? And if so, what form does that expectation actually take inside a plant? Some species clearly use photoperiod, the relative lengths of day and night, not only to trigger flowering at appropriate times, but to control expression of entire suites of genes related to reproduction, growth allocation, and defense chemistry. The change in daylight acts not as a simple on-off trigger, but as a complex cue, something interpreted through the plant's internal model of passing time and changing seasons. This idea that plants actively construct internal models of time, space, and environmental contingency is still controversial in some circles, but it fits increasingly well with a growing body of evidence suggesting that plants are not just passive filters of environmental input, they are active interpreters of their world. And like any interpreter, they must carry something inside themselves that meaningfully reflects the outside world, a kind of internal mirror shaped by accumulated memory and coded in chemistry, distributed across tissues and cell populations. It's not metaphor, it's biochemistry with genuine representational properties. Some researchers now argue that this ability to model the environment, to forecast future states, to integrate competing signals, to prioritize among options, is actually the core of cognition itself, stripped to its essence. Not awareness, not sentience, not emotion, but information processing, computation in the broadest sense. A biological system, even one entirely without a brain, may still be genuinely intelligent if it can gather information from its environment, evaluate trade-offs among options, and adaptively adjust behavior in ways that increase survival and reproduction. And by that standard, plants, slow, silent, rooted in place, may actually be among the most underestimated intelligences on our entire planet. But if we accept that plants compute, that they model their world, that they predict and act on information in sophisticated ways, then an entirely new question emerges. Can these systems be simulated? And if so, what might we learn by translating the logic of a plant into the logic of a machine? In recent years, researchers in bio-inspired robotics and artificial intelligence have started turning to plants not just as subjects of study, but as active models for design inspiration. Their decentralized decision-making, their adaptive thresholds, their integration of slow but remarkably reliable signals, these aren't just biological quirks or curiosities, they're proven strategies, and they may offer genuinely powerful templates for building more robust, resilient, adaptable forms of intelligence in artificial systems. One research group, directly inspired by climbing plants, developed robotic tendrils that sense and respond to touch in real time. These soft robots don't follow any pre-programmed path. Instead, they adjust growth-like extensions dynamically in response to environmental cues they encounter, curling toward supports, avoiding obstacles, optimizing grip with minimal energy expenditure. The algorithms governing these behaviors borrow directly from plant physiology, relying on local sensing, distributed processing, and continuous feedback between action and environment. In essence, they grow rather than simply move, a fundamentally different paradigm. Another team created experimental systems that mimic root growth strategies. These robotic roots search for nutrients by spreading into artificial soil substrates, not randomly, but according to simulated gradients of chemical information detected by sensors. The robot uses a network of simple, independent processes to decide which branch to extend next, based purely on local feedback. There's no central controller, no CPU dictating movement from above. The intelligence is emergent, distributed across the entire system, just like in actual plants. And the result is a machine that doesn't solve spatial problems the way animals do, through centralized planning and rapid movement, but the way a root system might, through patient exploration, distributed sensing, gradual commitment of resources. These designs aren't just clever engineering novelties, they highlight something genuinely profound, that the fundamental principles governing plant behavior, slowness, decentralization, adaptivity, resource efficiency, may be just as valuable, perhaps even more valuable, in certain artificial systems. In fields like swarm robotics, disaster response scenarios, or deep space exploration, where fast communication isn't always possible and autonomous operation is absolutely essential, plant-like strategies could offer a quiet kind of robustness, one that doesn't rely on split-second reactions, but on gradual, cumulative sensing, on decisions made not in haste, but in harmony with slowly changing context. Some researchers are even looking seriously into plant-based computation, not as a theoretical exercise, but as practical experimentation. Instead of using traditional silicon circuits to process information, they're exploring how real plants, or isolated plant tissues, might actually serve as living computational substrates. In one particularly fascinating study, scientists used lettuce seedlings as biological logic gates, exploiting their natural electrical properties. By applying weak voltages at specific points and carefully measuring outputs elsewhere, they successfully demonstrated simple forms of logic operations and, or not gates built from living tissue. It's rudimentary still, obviously, but it powerfully suggests that even living matter without any neurons whatsoever can process input and produce defined rule-based output, can compute in a genuine sense. Why does this matter beyond pure scientific curiosity? Because it forces us to dramatically expand what we mean by intelligence itself. For most of human history, we've equated thinking with speed, with complexity, with the brilliant sparkle of electricity racing through brain tissue. We've assumed thought requires something like what we have. But plants invite us, almost demand that we consider a radically different model, one that's slow, modular, patient, one that encodes memory not in neurons firing, but in growth patterns and epigenetic shifts that persist across seasons, one that may prove not only biologically insightful, but also technologically useful in ways we're only beginning to explore. Some of the most exciting frontiers in plant science today aren't just about documenting what plants already do, impressive as that is. They're about exploring what plants might teach us, what principles we might extract and apply elsewhere. because, as strange as it might sound at first, plant behavior is genuinely beginning to inform the design of next-generation artificial intelligence. Traditional AI systems are explicitly modeled after animal brains, networks of nodes simulating neurons, learning from data through feedback and reinforcement, processing information through centralized architectures. But that's only one possible way to process information. Plants offer a radically different blueprint entirely. They operate without neurons, without any centralized control, and yet still manage to sense, decide, coordinate, and remember, all within a distributed, decentralized architecture where every part contributes. This model, distributed sensing combined with local decision-making, has started to genuinely influence certain areas of AI research, especially in fields like swarm robotics and edge computing. Engineers are asking increasingly, what if we didn't actually need a central processor to manage a complex system? What if each node, each individual robot, each sensor could behave more like a plant cell, acting independently while still contributing meaningfully to collective behavior? This decentralized model offers remarkable resilience. If a plant loses a leaf, it doesn't shut down. If a root gets damaged, others compensate automatically. Similarly, a system built on plant-inspired architecture might prove far more fault-tolerant, able to adapt to changing environments, root around damaged components, continue functioning effectively even under double or triple stress. Some researchers are even designing genuinely plant-like robots, soft, growing machines that change shape continuously in response to their surroundings. These robots don't move like animals at all. They grow like vines, expanding and anchoring themselves as they explore new territory. Their behavior gets governed not by central commands issued from a brain-like processor, but by local conditions encountered: light levels, moisture, obstacles detected. It's a completely new paradigm for movement and adaptation, one rooted in growth rather than locomotion, in patient expansion rather than rapid transit. And beyond robotics, there's growing serious interest in how plants manage complexity so effectively. A single mature tree manages millions of individual leaves, each one continuously responding to light, temperature, and water availability. Yet the tree as a whole maintains balance, homeostasis across vast scales. That kind of hierarchical coordination from individual functional unit up to collective organism could genuinely inform how we build scalable AI systems that remain both robust and adaptive as they grow. There's also a profound philosophical dimension to all of this work. As artificial intelligence becomes increasingly powerful, more deeply embedded in our world, we're faced with a genuinely foundational question: what actually counts as intelligence in the first place? For decades, our benchmarks were almost exclusively modeled after human cognition: chess mastery, language fluency, logical deduction, pattern recognition. But plants operate entirely outside these frameworks, not because they're inferior, not because they're failed attempts at being animals, but because their evolutionary context is fundamentally different. Their intelligence, if we're going to use that word, is slow, embodied, distributed, and deeply entwined with physical environment in ways our intelligence simply isn't. And in some ways, this plant-like intelligence may actually be more relevant to our technological future than we've realized. As we increasingly deploy AI into physical systems, autonomous vehicles navigating cities, adaptive architecture responding to weather, environmental monitoring networks spanning continents, the goal isn't always to simulate human minds. It's to build systems that thrive under constraint, that sense without seeing in traditional ways, that react without moving rapidly, that adapt, persist, and optimize even when centralized control becomes impossible. This recognition has sparked growing interest in what's now being called plant-inspired computing, an emerging interdisciplinary field where researchers deliberately draw on biological strategies used by plants to develop novel algorithms and machine intelligence architectures. For example, distributed sensing and control, absolute hallmarks of plant behavior, have direct applications in robotics and swarm systems, where no single node governs the whole, but intelligence genuinely emerges from the combined interactions of many simple parts working together. In plants, this allows decentralized decision-making. Root tips explore independently, but share chemical information. In robots, it means swarms that can search disaster zones or survey ecosystems without any leader, without any central coordinator. Similarly, researchers are actively investigating how plants encode memory in epigenetic patterns and how those biological strategies might inform entirely new models for long-term learning in machines. Unlike traditional memory storage, which is centralized and explicit, stored in defined locations, plant memory is adaptive, resilient, embedded in physical structure itself. It's not just data sitting somewhere, it's behavior modified by experience, with no need for digital storage or central oversight of any kind. These aren't just loose metaphors or poetic comparisons, they're working models being tested in laboratories. In one line of research, scientists have successfully used plant root growth algorithms to solve complex optimization problems, like finding the shortest path through a maze, not by calculating every possible option exhaustively, but by exploring a field of possibilities in parallel and reinforcing paths that prove effective over time. It's a kind of trial and error learning that mimics evolution itself rather than pure logic, and remarkably, it works, often more efficiently than traditional algorithmic approaches for certain classes of problems. And the parallels don't stop at behavior alone. Some researchers are taking things a significant step further, exploring whether entirely new forms of artificial intelligence might be built using actual plant materials themselves, not just inspired by plants, but incorporating them. This is the core idea behind plant-based biohybrid systems, experimental technologies where living plants get integrated directly with electronic components to create sensors, processors, or communication networks that blend biological adaptability with machine precision in novel ways. For instance, because plants naturally respond to humidity, light, touch, and environmental pollutants, their tissues can be harnessed as remarkably sensitive environmental sensors, detecting changes with sensitivity that rivals or even surpasses many human-made devices. One project successfully used a plant's changing electrical resistance to detect airborne toxins at very low concentrations. When exposed to certain chemicals, the plant's physiology altered subtly but measurably. Electrodes attached to the leaves converted these physiological changes directly into data, effectively turning the plant into a kind of living circuit. No batteries, no artificial inputs, just biology doing what it already does naturally with a little help from technology. This convergence of plant biology and machine learning has begun to genuinely shift how we think about intelligence itself at the most fundamental level. If cognition doesn't require a brain, if information can be processed through slow, chemical, decentralized means, then what else might qualify as a mind?
What other forms of intelligence are we missing entirely? Some theorists have proposed a framework known as minimal cognition, the idea that cognition exists on a broad spectrum and that even very simple systems can exhibit the building blocks of genuinely intelligent behavior if you know what to look for. Under this view, the threshold for being considered a cognitive system isn't having a brain or consciousness or even neurons. It's simply the ability to acquire, store, process, and respond to information in ways that enhance survival or efficiency over time. By that definition, a plant, with its documented ability to sense, to integrate signals, to adjust behavior based on past experience, and even to signal others and coordinate responses, might genuinely qualify as a minimally cognitive agent. It wouldn't know in the way humans know, it wouldn't feel in the way animals feel, but it would participate in something genuinely adjacent, a kind of distributed awareness rooted in the body, shaped by context, guided by continuous feedback. This raises a fascinating, almost dizzying possibility. If intelligence can emerge without neurons, if memory can exist without a mind as we understand it, then perhaps we've been looking at cognition through far too narrow a lens all along. We've assumed that thought must resemble our own, that awareness must be fast, mobile, centralized, and internal, happening inside something like a head. But nature may be offering us a much broader, more inclusive definition, one where thought is not a location in space, but a process unfolding over time, not a spark, but a slow, persistent unfolding of potential. This broader view doesn't just expand the scope of what counts as cognition, it invites us to fundamentally rethink our relationship with other forms of life entirely. Plants, from this perspective, are not passive scenery, not green wallpaper for animal life. They are active participants in their environment, constantly solving problems, communicating, making decisions, just on a timeline and in a language we've only recently begun to decipher and understand. It also challenges the way we draw boundaries between living systems and artificial ones in profound ways. As researchers develop new forms of synthetic biology and plant-inspired robotics, the behaviors of plants, slow sensing, distributed control, adaptive response, are becoming working models for how to build more resilient, flexible, and sustainable machines. In some cases, engineers are designing soft robots that genuinely mimic root growth, or experimental circuits that process information chemically rather than electronically, all directly inspired by how plants manage life without any movement at all. And in the realm of artificial intelligence more broadly, plant biology is raising genuinely new questions about how intelligence can be embodied in different ways. Can a system without centralized processing still be considered smart? Can intelligence emerge from networks that grow rather than compute in traditional ways? These questions don't just apply to forests or gardens anymore. They apply directly to the future of our own technologies, to how we build systems that must operate autonomously in uncertain environments. These questions are already actively shaping new fields of inquiry across multiple disciplines. In bio-inspired computing, for example, researchers are beginning to design information systems that process data more like plants do, using parallel distributed networks that respond to environmental context in real time rather than following fixed algorithms. Some experimental systems even incorporate living components like slime molds or engineered root-like structures to solve problems in ways that are fundamentally adaptive rather than purely algorithmic, responsive rather than merely programmed. The goal isn't to replicate human intelligence in a different form, it's to explore genuinely alternative models, forms of cognition that arise not from brains or logic alone, but from embodiment, from continuous responsiveness, from evolutionary optimization over deep time.
In this sense, plants are not just subjects of our study, passive objects we examine. They are collaborators in a broader reimagining of intelligence itself, teachers offering lessons in patience, resilience, distributed problem solving. Philosophers of mind have taken notice too. The rise of plant cognition studies has prompted renewed interest in ancient questions about what it means to be a thinking thing, what separates mind from matter, where consciousness begins and ends. If intelligence doesn't require a brain, if learning can occur without consciousness, if memory can exist without subjective experience, then our definitions desperately need to change, need to expand. Some thinkers now argue for a more inclusive framework, one that sees cognition not as a simple binary, you either have it or you don't, but as a spectrum or even a multi-dimensional space with different kinds of minds occupying different regions entirely. Even in artificial systems, this notion of distributed intelligence is starting to inspire genuinely new ways of thinking about machine learning and AI architecture. Computer scientists and engineers studying plant biology have begun borrowing ideas from this decentralized approach to problem solving. Instead of building centralized control systems like traditional neural networks with clear hierarchies, they're exploring how useful behavior might emerge organically from thousands of simple communicating units, each one processing a little bit of information and passing signals onward to neighbors. These approaches, sometimes called plant-inspired computation, are part of a growing effort to rethink artificial intelligence from the ground up, to start over with different assumptions. Rather than copying the brain with its rigid hierarchies and rapid-fire synapses, what if we designed machines that think more like forests do? Systems that grow over time, adapt continuously, respond contextually, not by sheer speed, but by depth of integration, not by logic alone, but by experience accumulated across a vast, interconnected web of sensors and actuators. And in a surprising twist that nobody really saw coming, some of the computational techniques developed to model plant intelligence are now feeding back into biology itself, creating a productive loop. AI tools trained on plant imaging data, like time-lapse recordings of root movement or cellular growth patterns, are helping researchers uncover previously unseen rhythms in plant development. Hidden pulses in growth rates, subtle cycles of chemical signaling, patterns of behavior that no human observer would have had the patience, perspective, or pattern recognition capacity to detect on their own. It's a quiet irony worth appreciating. Machines originally built to mimic us, now helping us decode organisms utterly unlike ourselves. And in doing so, perhaps they're also helping us redefine what intelligence truly means at its core. For centuries, we've drawn hard lines between thinkers and non-thinkers, between animals and plants, between mind and matter, between the quick and the slow. But as we uncover more about how plants actually behave, adapt, and respond, not blindly but selectively,